The door creaked open before dawn, dust swirling in the beam of his flashlight. Ethan Walker, 37, single father and former mechanic, thought the rundown farmhouse meant a fresh start. Then a woman whispered, "Don't move." Two frightened women stood in the kitchen, one gripping a pan, the other shaking. Ethan froze. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Ethan Walker stopped the truck at the rusted gate and cut the engine. Silence rushed in, thick, unfamiliar, broken only by the wind dragging through dead grass. The farmhouse stood ahead of him, slumped and weather-beaten, its white paint long surrendered to time. It wasn't the dream house he once imagined, but it was all he could afford after years of scraping by as a mechanic and then selling his tools to survive. A reset, he told himself. A place where memories wouldn't echo so loudly. In the passenger seat, his 8-year-old daughter Sophie leaned forward, eyes wide with cautious curiosity. "It looks lonely," she said. "So did we," Ethan answered softly, then smiled to hide the weight behind the words. He grabbed the keys and their bags and climbed the steps. The porch groaned beneath him like a warning. When he unlocked the door and pushed it open, the smell surprised him, not abandonment, but warmth. Soup. Smoke. Life. Ethan froze. A sharp voice cut through the dim interior. "Don't come any closer." Two women stood in the kitchen. The younger one, barely more than a girl, held a metal pan in shaking hands. Her jeans were torn at the knee, her hair pulled back with no care for appearances. The older one stood slightly in front of her, protective, eyes alert despite exhaustion etched deep into her face. "This is our place," the younger woman said, forcing strength into her voice. Ethan slowly raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Sophie peeked out from behind his leg. The older woman noticed her immediately, and something in her posture changed. "I bought the house," Ethan said gently, pulling the folded deed from his jacket and placing it on the counter. "Name's Ethan Walker." The older woman stepped closer, scanned the paper, then closed her eyes as if bracing for the inevitable. "I'm Hannah Moore," she said quietly. "This is my sister, Paige. We thought no one owned it." The listing said abandoned. Paige swallowed hard. "We had nowhere else." Ethan looked around. A pot simmered on the stove. Blankets lined the couch. Candles flickered in jars. This wasn't trespassing, it was survival. He could do the right thing legally. Call the sheriff. Take back what he paid for. Instead, Sophie tugged his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "they're scared." The words hit him harder than any argument could. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You can stay. For now." Paige stared. "You're serious?" "There will be rules," he said firmly. "No trouble. No secrets that could put my daughter at risk. And if danger comes, we face it together." Hannah nodded, tears threatening but not falling. "Thank you. You have no idea." "I do," Ethan interrupted quietly. "I really do." That night, after Sophie fell asleep wrapped in borrowed blankets, Ethan lay awake listening to the house settle. Somewhere beneath the floorboards came a hollow sound, a soft thud, like something shifting below. The house wasn't just old. It was hiding something. And by opening his door to two strangers, Ethan had unknowingly stepped into a story far bigger, and far darker, than his own need for a fresh start. Morning brought light, and with it, reality. Ethan woke to the sound of quiet movement downstairs, the careful kind that tried not to be heard. He lay still for a moment, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the farmhouse breathe. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in a house. That should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt complicated. He dressed quickly and stepped into the hallway. Hannah was already up, sleeves rolled, scrubbing the kitchen counter with practiced efficiency, as if usefulness were a form of apology. Paige sat at the table, twisting a chipped mug between her hands. Sophie was on the floor beside her, lining up pebbles she'd found outside like they were treasures. "They're crystals," Sophie explained seriously. "This one's for protection." Paige smiled despite herself. It was the first smile Ethan had seen from her. "Breakfast?" Hannah asked, tentative. Ethan nodded. "I'll check the water line after." The farmhouse needed everything: repairs, patience, money. Ethan welcomed the distraction. Fixing broken things was familiar. Easier than navigating the quiet tension that hung between adults who didn't quite trust kindness yet. He spent the late morning replacing rotted boards in the living room floor. The wood was worse than he thought: soft, warped, hollow. Too hollow. His crowbar struck something beneath the planks. Not earth. Not stone. Wood. Ethan frowned and pried harder. A section gave way, revealing a narrow outline, a hidden door sealed flush with the floor, nearly invisible beneath layers of dust and neglect. Hannah appeared behind him. "That wasn't there before," she said softly. "It was," Ethan replied. "Just hidden." Paige stepped closer, eyes wide. "We never went near this part of the room. It always felt wrong." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to stop. To close it back up and pretend ignorance was safer. But he lifted the panel. A ladder descended into darkness. The air that rose from below was stale and cold. Ethan climbed down first, phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The cellar beneath the farmhouse was larger than expected. Shelves lined the walls. Old crates. Filing boxes wrapped in plastic. And stacks of cash. Real cash. Ethan stared, pulse roaring in his ears. "What is this?" Paige whispered from above. Hannah climbed down slowly. The moment her light hit the boxes of documents, her face drained of color. "No," she said. "No, no, no." She dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she opened a folder. Inside were contracts, land deeds, shell company records, all bearing a name Ethan hadn't heard before but would soon learn to fear. Marcus Hale. "My ex," Hannah said, voice hollow. "He used this land to hide money. Paper trails. Things that could put him in prison." Ethan looked back at the ladder, at Sophie's small shoes visible at the top step. Danger rushed in all at once. That afternoon, a black SUV rolled slowly past the farmhouse, tires crunching gravel that hadn't heard traffic in years. That evening, two men in county jackets knocked at the door. "Routine inspection," one said, eyes sliding past Ethan into the house. "This land may fall under restricted use." Hannah went pale. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the view inside. "Then you'll need a warrant," he said calmly. As the men left, Sophie tugged his hand. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Ethan knelt, meeting her eyes. "Maybe," he said honestly. "But we're not running." That night, Hannah finally told the truth, about Marcus's control, the threats, the years spent hiding and surviving. Ethan listened in silence. He didn't sleep after. Because deep down, he knew something terrible and simple. The house hadn't just sheltered Hannah and Paige. It had been hiding from Marcus Hale. And now, he knew exactly where to find them. The knock came before dawn. Not loud. Not urgent. 3 firm taps, measured, confident, the kind that assumed the door would open because it always had before. Ethan was already awake. He'd spent the night in the armchair with his boots on, the crowbar resting beside him like a poor excuse for security. When the sound echoed through the farmhouse, Hannah flinched from the couch where she'd slept sitting upright, arms wrapped around herself. Paige whispered, "That's him." Ethan didn't ask how she knew. Fear recognized fear. He moved to the window instead of the door. Outside, a single black SUV idled in the gray light. One man stood on the porch, tall, clean coat, hands empty and visible. He looked calm. Almost bored. That scared Ethan more than shouting would have. "Mr. Walker," the man called pleasantly. "I know you're home." Ethan opened the door just enough to keep his body blocking the entry. "Yes?" The man smiled, polite and sharp. "Name's Marcus Hale. I used to own this place." Hannah let out a quiet, broken sound behind Ethan. Marcus's eyes flicked past Ethan's shoulder, landed on her, and softened in a way that made Ethan's stomach turn. "There you are," Marcus said gently. "You really should have stayed gone." Ethan stepped forward. "You're trespassing." Marcus chuckled. "Legally?" "No. I'm just visiting an old property. I hear there may be complications with its status." He leaned closer, voice lowering. "You don't want trouble, Mr. Walker. You have a child." That did it. Ethan felt the line harden inside him, the one he crossed only when something mattered more than fear. "You leave," Ethan said evenly. "Now." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I tried courtesy." He turned and walked back to the SUV. As it pulled away, Ethan noticed the second vehicle parked farther down the road. Watching. The rest of the day unraveled fast. By noon, the county posted a notice on the gate citing environmental violations and pending seizure. By afternoon, Ethan's bank called, his loan flagged, his account temporarily frozen due to irregularities tied to property transfer. Marcus didn't need to threaten. He erased. Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone long after the call ended. His hands shook, not with panic, but anger. "I'm sorry," Hannah said, standing behind him. "If we leave, he'll stop." Ethan looked at her. Really looked. The years of damage. The reflex to disappear for other people's safety. "No," he said. "That's how men like him win." Paige stared. "He ruins people. He ruined us." Ethan nodded. "Then we do this right." That night, while Sophie slept with her crystals tucked under her pillow, Ethan scanned the documents from the cellar. Dates. Shell companies. Properties tied to Marcus's name but owned by no one on paper. A pattern. And one thing Marcus hadn't erased. Witnesses. Hannah's nursing license was still valid. Paige had emails, texts, years of threats she'd never deleted. Ethan recorded everything Marcus had said at the door, replaying the audio with grim satisfaction. "This will destroy him," Hannah whispered. "Or us," Ethan replied honestly. "If we mess up." The decision sat heavy between them. Finally, Sophie padded into the room, rubbing her eyes. "Why is everyone sad?" Ethan lifted her, held her close. "Because sometimes doing the right thing is scary," he said. Sophie considered that. Then nodded. "Okay. But we're still doing it, right?" Ethan smiled despite everything. "Yes," he said. "We are." Outside, the farmhouse stood quiet, but no longer hiding. And somewhere out there, Marcus Hale realized something had changed. For the first time in years, his shadow had met a man who wouldn't step out of it. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in layers, thin, deliberate, designed to exhaust rather than crush. The sheriff drove by twice a day without stopping. The power flickered at odd hours, then went out completely one evening before coming back on just long enough to remind them how fragile comfort was. A drone hovered once over the back field, buzzing low before vanishing into the trees. Marcus Hale never returned in person. He didn't need to. Ethan felt him everywhere. By midweek, the county inspection escalated into a formal hearing notice. If the land was seized, everything in it, including the cellar, would disappear into evidence limbo or worse, right back into Marcus's reach. "We're running out of time," Paige said, pacing the living room. "He's tightening the net." Hannah sat at the table with her laptop open, eyes bloodshot. "I sent the files to 3 agencies. Only one replied." Ethan looked up. "Which one?" "Financial crimes," she said. "They want more testimony, a timeline, and proof the documents weren't planted." Ethan rubbed his face. "Meaning, us." Silence settled heavy. That night, a storm rolled in from the west, thunder cracking close enough to rattle the windows. Sophie slept through it at first, but when the wind howled hard against the siding, she woke crying, clutching her blanket. Ethan scooped her up and carried her to the living room, where Hannah and Paige sat surrounded by papers. "What if he comes back?" Sophie asked, voice small. "He won't," Ethan said, though he couldn't be sure. "And if he does, we'll be ready." Sophie looked at Hannah. "You're not bad, right?" Hannah's breath caught. She knelt in front of Sophie. "No. I was just scared for a long time." Sophie thought about that, then nodded. "Me too. When Mom got sick." The words cut through the room. Hannah reached out, tentative, and Sophie let her. Just for a second. It was enough. The next morning, Ethan drove Hannah to the city. Not the courthouse. Not yet. They went to a small legal aid office squeezed between a pawn shop and a closed laundromat. A place that still believed in paper files and long conversations. The attorney, a tired man with kind eyes, listened without interrupting. When Hannah finished, hands trembling, he leaned back slowly. "This man's been untouchable because no one stood long enough to point at him," he said. "But this is real." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Back at the farmhouse, Paige worked methodically, scanning every document, labeling dates, cross-referencing names. She wasn't running anymore. She was building something solid. That afternoon, Marcus finally broke his silence. Ethan's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "You're making a mistake." Ethan typed back only 3 words. "We're not afraid." The response came instantly. "You should be." An hour later, the second SUV returned. This time, it didn't stop at the road. It drove straight through the gate. Ethan was already outside when it rolled up, rain plastering his jacket to his shoulders. The driver stayed inside, window cracked just enough. "This ends tonight," the voice said. "Sign the property back. Walk away." Ethan stepped closer, rain in his eyes, heart pounding. "No." The SUV revved, then stopped. The window rolled up. It pulled away fast, too fast. Behind it, red and blue lights crested the hill. Federal. The SUV vanished into the rain. Ethan stood there shaking as agents stepped out, badges flashing. Inside, Hannah covered her mouth, tears spilling, not from fear this time, but relief. Marcus Hale had overplayed his hand. And the storm, finally, was breaking in the right direction. The arrest didn't feel dramatic in the way movies promised. There were no shouted confessions, no triumphant speeches. Just the quiet efficiency of men and women who had finally been given enough truth to act. Marcus Hale was taken into custody 2 days later in the city, pulled from a glass-walled office he'd once believed made him untouchable. Fraud. Tax evasion. Coercion. Hidden assets. Obstruction. The list grew longer with every box recovered from the cellar beneath the farmhouse. Ethan watched the news footage on a small kitchen TV, Sophie sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him. She didn't fully understand what had happened, only that the bad man wouldn't be coming back. That's him?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. She frowned. "He doesn't look very big." Ethan smiled sadly. "They never do." The county withdrew its seizure notice within the week. The loan freeze lifted. The house, for the first time since Ethan bought it, truly belonged to him. To them. Hannah testified quietly, steadily. Not as a victim, but as a witness who had decided she was done being erased. Paige handed over years of messages and records she'd kept like scars, proof that fear could also be evidence. When it was over, Hannah sat on the courthouse steps, hands shaking, not from terror now, but release. "I don't know who I am without running," she admitted. "You'll figure it out," Ethan said. "You already started." Spring came slowly to the farmhouse. Ethan repaired the last of the floorboards, sealing the hidden door for good. Paige found work at a local bookstore, the kind of place that smelled like paper and second chances. Hannah returned to nursing, starting part-time at a clinic where no one knew her past unless she chose to share it. Sophie thrived in ways that surprised Ethan most of all. She laughed more. Slept better. She drew pictures of 4 people holding hands in front of a crooked house with flowers growing where weeds once were. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the field, Sophie looked up from the porch steps and said, "I think our house likes us now." Ethan glanced at Hannah, who was watching Sophie with an expression that looked dangerously close to hope. "I think you're right," he said. Months later, the farmhouse no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a home. Not because it was perfect, roof still leaked in one corner, the porch still groaned, but because no one inside it was hiding anymore. On a quiet night, long after Sophie had fallen asleep, Ethan and Hannah sat side by side on the porch, not touching, just close enough to feel warmth. "I never planned this," Hannah said softly. "Any of it?" "Me neither," Ethan replied. "But I don't regret it." She looked at him then, not with fear, not with gratitude, but with trust. And that felt like the beginning of something honest. The house stood silent behind them, no longer holding secrets, no longer hiding the past. It had done its job. Broken people didn't always meet by accident. Sometimes, they found one another because it was the only way to rebuild what had been lost, and choose, together, to become a family. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.